Hi, my name is Leandro Facchinetti, and let's write some code together, shall we? What we have on the menu today is part 3 of this saga of working in Caxa, this open source project of mine that allows you to package Node.js applications into executable binaries. And yesterday we talked about this first feature we want to implement this week, which is support for ARM architectures on the produced binaries. And with me today, I have my first guest, Matt. Thanks for joining us. You are the author of the pull request we are going to hopefully merge today. So you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Matt Anderson. I'm a physics PhD student at the University of Missouri, and I basically just do open source stuff for fun in my free time. That's how I got started doing all this. So
And
all of this is totally not related to what I do for a job. So
well, fair. I am using Caxa on my day job as well, but I must admit that the primary reason why I developed it was because I wanted to have it for my side project as well. So what is your side project that is using Caxa?
I'm part of a team that manages a web app called Dungeon Revealer. It's a tool that you use to play like tabletop role-playing games. And what you do is, as you're playing the game, the players might be moving through a map, and you don't want to show them the entire map at once. And you can just reveal the little sections that they've been on, and they can slowly move through the dungeon or whatever that you've made. And it's got extra extensions for like messaging and dice rolling, and you can put little monster tokens on it and move it around. So it's really just to help people play games. It's a lot of
And
fun.
you are not alone in developing this.
Yeah, I have one other developer that's actually working on it. He's the main developer, and I just kind of help him out with testing and maintaining the community and doing all the DevOps stuff is what I'm responsible for.
I see. So I suppose that it's using Caxa is a way to make the deployment easier.
Yes, absolutely. So our user base is it's part technical people and part completely like just lay people that just want something that works. So being able to package our web app into some just a single file that people just double click on and run is super important to us. Our users really, really need that.
And your users are not using a hosted version; they're self-hosting this.
Yeah, so right now we don't have it deployed on a website or anything yet. It's all self-hosted. So if everyone's on the same LAN, you could do it like a normal LAN party thing. Or we have some tutorials on how you can actually host it on your own website really easily using Docker and some
Ah,
reverse proxies. Yeah.
and the reason why you need Docker is for the reverse proxies and databases and everything else that
Mhm.
comes with the infrastructure for the website. That's
Yeah.
interesting. So for running locally, do you need Docker?
No, you could just use the binary or you could even just run from source. It's just Docker was a really easy way to package um, this web app. And it's something, so I really like this web app, but I hated running it from source. So I just found out a way to put it in Docker and I just presented it to the team and they liked it. And that's kind of how I jumped on and took over the rest of the deployment stuff.
All right. So you are using Cacha to build the Docker image, or do you have two
Oh,
separate ways of deploying?
yeah, it's separate. So we deploy our app as source, as Docker images for all the different architectures, and we want to use Cache to make executable files that people can just download and use. So
And if you're
we
running from
deploy.
Cacha, if you're running from Cacha, what's the story on HTTPS? I'm always interested in that.
So that's left up to the user and is usually handled by the reverse proxy. So for just like local area network stuff, it's not a problem, but it's
Yeah.
super easy to just use like Caddy or oh, I forget the other ones, but there's some really easy reverse proxies that you can use to set up the actual encryption.
Yeah. So Caddy is the usual suspect in this
Mhm.
sort of scenario. And I just want to briefly share what I'm doing in my app because I think it's interesting. I didn't want to teach people how to do this extra step of installing a reverse proxy. So
Mm.
what I'm doing in Kill the Newsletter and also my day job, which is a self-hosted app called Courselore, what I'm doing in both these apps is I'm using a Node.js, it's a library that does the certificate thing. So it goes to Let's Encrypt and gets a certificate. So you don't need a reverse proxy when running it. You may want to use one anyway, but you don't need it just for HTTPS. So you may want to run a reverse proxy if you have multiple services running on your machine and you would like
Yeah.
to route the different services differently. But if you have only Kill the Newsletter, Courselore, or your Dungeon Revealer app, if you have only one thing running on the machine, then you can literally just take the binary, say that it's running in production mode, and it will get the certificates and run it. So I'm saying this because I'm using this library, but it's a super small niche thing that many people don't need because they are not in the business of self-hosting. And this library is not popular, but it's great. And I want to spread the word. I have not developed it. It's by this group called The Small Web. I think that's the name. Their ethos is that the web can go back to its roots in a few ways, one of which being self-hosting services and federation and whatnot. So they have all these small libraries for working with self-hosted things, and I find this one very useful. And it's so fun that it just works because you take the caxa produced binary for Kill the Newsletter and you run it, and then you just see the certificate coming up and everything just works. It's a very nice deployment experience. I do have a video in my channel in which I show you how to deploy an instance of Kill the Newsletter if you're interested in seeing the...
I'll definitely check that out.
You may just point people with the tutorial and say, yeah, whatever you're doing, whenever this guy says Kill the Newsletter, just forget about it. Think Dungeon Revealer instead, and then you get some documentation for free because I show you how to set up DNS and how to start a server using DigitalOcean because it's simple, but you can really use anything. All right, okay, so this is how you got into caxa, and you are contributing this thing so that caxa is supported and works in ARM architecture. So
yes.
How did you get into ARM? And I assume that's because of Raspberry Pi. So how did you get into that?
Yeah. So I just always liked Raspberry Pis, but the reason why I'm wanting ARM for Node.js compilation is because we actually have users that take our web app and put them on Raspberry Pis and then attach those to a TV that's in a frame that's laid straight down on a table. So it's a self-contained system where they can just run our app on the Raspberry Pi and they just take the TV almost in like a suitcase and it's just all right there. So we needed ARM for Dungeon Revealer, and the only packaging solution that we found that could do that was PKG, but we kind of hate it, and we would love to try something else that's simpler. Oh, it's lots of reasons. It pins you to old versions of Node. I actually have a list. Hold on. Yeah, it pins you to old versions of Node. It handles the native modules in a stupid way. All the Node.js patchet is, and the other developer says they're actually dropping ARM support soon, and their whole maintainer scenario is weird. I heard that the maintainers are like swapping out to different people, so it's just become a nightmare to really keep up with.
I'm really interested in the backstory for what's happening in PKG because I know it's backed by a company, and this company is developing other open source projects, and they seem to be good about maintaining them. But it seems like PKG has been abandoned for a while, and now they're starting to pick it up again. And it seems like different people are involved this time. I don't know exactly what's happening there, but I mean, I understand the effort that goes into maintaining open source projects, and they do have many other open source projects that they have to maintain, and it seems like that PKG is not their main priority these days. So, and I agree that patching Node is bad because of you don't get the latest versions, and
Hmm.
there's this whole thing of trusting what you're running, and you're running now a different
Hmm.
executable in production than you are in development. But in Spirit, you said that it's doing a dumb thing with native modules. In Spirit, that's exactly what Caxa does with your whole project. So it's
Yeah.
doing the stupid thing with your whole project.
Yeah, that's why I like cache a lot, is because I can actually understand what it's doing. It's simple enough that I really understand what's going on.
Yeah, it is the virtual and also the issue with Caxa that it's so naive. But we are
Mhm.
making it better. So, all right, let's jump into your pull request. And
Sure.
um, it is right here. And you did an awesome job of writing everything and convincing me that, and anyone who reads this, convincing them that this is the right approach. And we already discussed this yesterday in the stream, so I'm not going to rehash everything. Let's just go over what we have here
Mhm.
and get it ready to merge. So what you have in this pull request, as far as I understand, is just the building of the binaries, not the installation of the stubs, and then
Right.
selecting the right stubs for your platform. All that story needs to be developed, but it's not in this pull
Yeah.
request, right?
Yeah.
And you're
And
lifting
that's
this
partially
from
because
Dungeon. You're lifting this from Dungeon Revealer, right?
yes. Yeah, which I wrote as well, but I just took that as a template.
Hmm. So
Part of the reason why I haven't done any of the detecting stuff is I'm not actually a JavaScript developer. I just know
fair.
how to do the Docker stuff.
Yeah, and this whole thing is interconnected. How we are
Mhm.
building is related to how we are shipping this, and also related to how we are going to select the right stub to use. And
Right.
we have to think about it. In fact, I was thinking about this since yesterday's stream, and I have a question for you. What is your
Mhm.
story on ARM for macOS, the M1
So
processors?
as far as Kasha supporting it, or just my experience with it?
No, no, no. Yeah, I mean, in this, I did not read the whole configuration file yet, and I know that you're
Yeah.
using Docker to emulate ARM and to build the Linux binaries, but as
Mhm.
far as I understand, Docker cannot emulate macOS, especially
Yeah,
not
that's
the
what I
ARM
was reading
version.
this morning. Yeah, I think some more research needs to be done. I saw some people saying that you could use uh, a different kind of emulation from QEMU. I forget exactly where, and I shouldn't be quoting it because I'm not an expert, but I think they said you can use KVM virtualization to run Mac OS on a Linux machine. But I think more research needs to be done for that. So maybe in the future I can add that.
I see. Yeah. So if the way I have it in my head, the breakdown is we have Windows support, 64 bits
Mhm.
only, or
Mhm.
or do you think it's worth having 32 bits? I don't think it's worth having it.
I don't think it is.
Yeah. So just having Windows support is important because suppose someone has a Windows machine and they want to run Dungeon Revealer. We need Windows support, but 64 and Intel is all we need. And then Linux, we want 64 and 32 bits just because it's easy, right?
Mhm.
And then ARM,
Yeah, we could do that.
I'm not sure that Linux 32 is relevant, but Linux 64 is definitely a must because that's what
Yes.
usually runs in servers. And then there is ARM 6, 7, and 8. And I was
Yes.
looking at the Go page, the Golang download page,
Mhm.
and I found something interesting there. I want to know if you know more about this
Mhm.
story. So they have a list here of supported platforms you can then just download the binaries from. Uh, and they have ARM 6 and they have ARM 8,
Right.
but they don't have ARM 7.
Right.
And I read somewhere
So
that they don't have ARM 7 because ARM 6 runs in ARM 7 and there is no
mhm.
performance penalties, so they never bothered. Do you know something about
Yes.
this?
So the difference between ARM 6 and ARM 7 is actually quite minimal as far as hardware goes. And I'm not an expert in this, but from what I've read, they both they're both 32-bit processors, and they both use special hardware chips to do float operations. It's just the difference between ARM 6 and 7 is that you can have other specific hardware that does other specific instructions differently. And that's as far as I understand because it's a bit out of my depth. So ARM 6 and ARM 7 are very closely related. And I do know that ARM 7 does have backwards compatibility with ARM 6. So any ARM 6 binary should run on an ARM 7 machine.
And weirdly enough, in
not
your
necessarily
tests, you
bad.
had the opposite. You had the opposite work as well,
Yeah.
right?
No, so there was actually an issue with the compilation command I was using, and it was not appending the identifiers correctly to the binary, and I actually went and fixed that in my test. But so with that whole test, what I found out was the emulated binaries that I generated, both the ARM 6 and ARM 7 version worked on an ARM 6 machine, but when I cross-compiled to ARM 6 and ARM 7, the ARM 7 binary didn't work on the ARM 6 machine. So there's something different about how emulated ARM 7 works and cross-compiled ARM 7 works. And I don't understand that, to be honest. I was mostly just trying to point out that it's a weird scenario between these two versions of ARM.
Yeah. I mean, I guess we both have a clue of what's going on there. The cross compiler isn't as good as the native compiler, and
Yeah.
because it's hard to do cross compilation, it's a wonderful feature of Go that it's even able to do that in the first place. So it's okay if it doesn't produce a binary that won't run in an architecture that it wasn't designed for.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, my
Okay.
suspicion is that it enables some kind of instruction set for the ARM 7 cross compile that's not available for ARM 6, but I don't know the details.
That would make sense. And and in Node.js land, we have the opposite problem, which is there is no precompiled binary for ARM 6. So
Yeah.
the implication here is, as far as I understand, it is hard for us to run the tests unless we find a Docker machine that has Node.js and that has ARM 6 emulation. If we
Yes.
find that, then we can run the tests. Otherwise, we'll never bother running the tests. But other than that,
Yeah.
caxa will just accept whatever Node.js version you throw at it, so it should be fine.
I actually did find an image that can do that, so it is possible.
And you said this morning or yesterday evening, I don't remember, that your strategy is to do this in 2 steps. First, we build a stub using the Docker image to emulate the architecture. And then we take that stub, we put it in the GitHub Actions asset. Or is it an asset? What is it called?
It's artifact.
Artifact, exactly, yeah. So an asset
Yeah.
is with a release. I don't know why they have different names
Yes.
there. In any case,
I
so you put it as GitHub Actions. Each run has a bunch of artifacts, and then in another job, you pull that binary, that stub that you have generated, and then you run the tests.
Yes.
Right. And that's more or less what's going to happen when we install caxa, the npm package. It is going to find what is the correct binary to download, and instead of downloading from a GitHub Actions artifact,
A release
it will
page.
download from a GitHub release.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. And I guess we are going to do, as I was saying before, Windows 64. We are going to do Linux 64, maybe 32 if it's easy enough. We'll do, and that's where I don't know. What are we going to do? Do you think we should do ARM 8, ARM 6 using native binaries here, or maybe did you find a Docker container that is capable of compiling Go for ARM 7 specifically?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So there are these Docker containers that are their username is the architecture, and then it does slash whatever you're looking for, and those are actually based on. So, for example, ARM32 v7 slash Golang is actually a container that either the Docker community or the language maintainers actually make that is specifically for that architecture. So if you just go to Docker Hub /u /arm32 v7, you'll see there are tons of different projects.
What is the username I should look for?
ARM32 v7.
32 v7.
Yeah. And you want to, go to that profile. And you see they have almost anything you want. And it's all of those projects specifically built for that architecture. And awesome. There are other users like ARM32 v6 and ARM64 v8. So it's actually maintained by people either closely related to the actual project maintainers or the project maintainers themselves.
Awesome. So we'll do ARM versions 6, 7, and 8. And do you know why the Golang community decided not to have a precompiled binary here for download for ARM7, and yet they are maintaining, or someone else is maintaining, an ARM server version of it?
I do not know, to be honest.
Doesn't really matter. So we'll do all that, and we will do macOS 64, all using the GitHub Actions. And macOS ARM, we cannot do using the GitHub Actions just yet because it's complicated. It's new.
We could use cross compilation to get that binary, just because Go can cross compile.
That's what I was thinking.
Or something weirder.
No, I was thinking about that. We can cross compile as our last resort, so we can cross compile. I guess we'll do that on the macOS build. We'll cross compile to ARM, and we will not run the tests on macOS M1. And I'm completely okay with that, especially because the Node.js community picked up M1 processors just on the 16 release, which is 1 month old at this point. So,
wow.
And I wonder what would happen if you had a caxa executable with an M1 stub, but with a Node version that is like a Node version 14 or 15. In that case, you would have a stub that is for ARM, but you would have the actual executable that will run in the end of the day using Intel. I think it should just work. I had some experience with other projects in which if you call something else, it will just fire Rosetta 2, and it just works. Yeah. But I will do a manual test. We'll not be able to run this on GitHub Actions probably, but I do have a Mac with an M1 processor, and you have Raspberry Pi, so we'll run that on real hardware as well. Let's get to the configuration here. So you are running this on every branch and on every tag, right?
Yes.
Okay, I guess I am going to pull this. So I have this on Visual Studio Code, and I can start making notes or changing things as we go.
Sure.
So I need to copy this is in your fork. I'm not signed in, so it's not showing me the SSH URL, but never mind that. I know what the URL will be. So again, git remote add maxp2 git at github.com, and then that. And then we can git fetch maxp2. That will get us the actions stubs branch. So git. Oh, that will be weird because I have changes here. Let's see what I have.
Oh, I also have a ton of tags in my branch or in my fork as well. So be careful when you're pushing tags.
Ah, okay,
Yeah.
fair.
Yeah, see all
You
those
had to do that
test.
to test
Yeah.
on GitHub Actions, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Yeah, that's not an issue at all because we'll never have a tag that is 1.0 again.
Okay. I
Yeah.
just didn't want to clutter the repo with a ton of stupid tags.
Oh yeah, so you mean I cannot just say this, right? Because that
Yeah,
will push
I
all the
would delete
tags.
the tags yeah, I would delete all the tags you have first before doing that.
Yeah. I usually don't do that unless I am being lazy, but if I'm being lazy
That's
and I
right.
end up pushing all this, then I know how to delete a tag from GitHub. It's fine. And I
Okay,
will do
cool.
that before it publishes to npm because the rest of the GitHub
Hmm.
Actions configuration will push any tag to npm as a new version.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. So I was compiling stubs. I guess I did that on the stream yesterday, so that all can go away. And then here we have some comments, and here we have some comments. So I guess I'll just commit this on a branch. I'll call this branch to do
Hmm.
whatever. I'm just committing so I can check out your branch. So git checkout action stubs. Then we can look at the GitHub configuration. So one thing I want to do right away is that I like your configuration so much that I think we'll merge it into main. There is no reason to
Yeah,
keep this separate.
yeah, I was
And
thinking about that too.
so I guess that's what we can do. We can come here to your configuration, look at mine, and just borrow or whatever we need from here and delete whatever we need from there.
Mhm.
So usually don't name my builds just because it's less configuration to write. So
Okay,
I'm not
that's
lifting
totally
that
fine.
part. And you're running on every branch and on every tag. So it more or less
Mhm.
means we are always running this. So this is okay. So I'm going to start
Mhm.
deleting the things we don't need from here.
Sure.
And then we have some defaults here. Uh,
Yeah. So the only important part is that the shell is bash, because if you try and run these things on Windows, it tries to run in PowerShell, and it doesn't always. Trying to get the commands to sync up between PowerShell and bash is a nightmare. So you can actually just run bash on the Windows. But you can set that in the actual build x64 native part. I'll look up how to do that. That just sets it default for every time you every time you invoke run, it just starts with bash and it starts in the stubs directory. But you could also just do cd stubs at every run. It's not that big of a deal.
yeah, I think we'll have to do that here because we will merge these actions into this.
Yeah,
But also,
totally.
when you're running the GitHub Actions Windows environment, it
Mm-hmm.
has the Windows subsystem for Linux. That's why you're able to run
Mm-hmm.
Bash in the first place. Do you know the story about compatibility between Bash and PowerShell and the command prompt on Windows? Because the reason why I'm saying this is that I would very much like to tell people take this .exe file, double click it, and it will work.
Right.
And I don't want to necessarily tell people, oh, you need Windows Subsystem for Linux installed. I don't think it
I
would be
think
an issue,
it.
but I just want to know if you have some experience there.
No, this is the first time I've used Bash on Windows with GitHub Actions, but I believe it just makes the Windows binary uh, the same way. I think it's just changing the shell. It's not actually using Linux.
It should. It should use Linux. It is like an emulation
Okay.
layer. But again, for building the stubs, we don't care at all. For testing, we
Hmm.
probably don't care, but we may. Um,
That's fair. Yeah, I can investigate that.
but honestly, I don't think it matters. When you have a .exe at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you're running it from PowerShell, from Bash, from whatever. In fact,
Hmm.
when you're running the stub will call Node.js or whatever command you tell caxa to run. And I think it will call outside the context of any shell. It will not open a terminal for
Hmm.
that. not even internally. It will fork, well, not fork because it's
Right.
Windows, but it will fire a process. So I think that this is completely fine. And it is a clever idea. I have never thought of this. In fact, what I do in my other projects when I need to run on Windows, and I always try to test things on Windows, is I make sure that the same text will work in PowerShell as well. So
Yeah,
I'm calling
exactly.
like,
That's hard though.
it is, it is. I run into issues with that, especially when you have to quote,
Mhm.
double quotes and
Yes.
escaping. It's all different in the different operating systems, and or rather, it's all different in the different terminals. So Bash is different from PowerShell, which is different
Mhm.
from CMD on Windows. So it is a nightmare, and this is brilliant. I didn't think about this before, but it's brilliant. So that we are keeping. So we have several jobs here. This
Mhm.
is to build uh, Intel, and then build ARM,
Mhm.
and then upload.
Yeah. The testing
Okay.
is done in each of the build jobs as well.
Oh, so you have one job where you build and test.
Yes. Yeah,
Oh,
where
okay.
building and testing is just subsequent steps in that job. So it's still
Makes
testing
sense.
in the same environment it was built in.
Uh, so you were able. I was thinking about this, and I know that there are, and we tested this yesterday. I guess it was you who suggested this. There are these Docker images that have
Mhm.
ARM and Go already in place. And then we
Mhm.
talked about installing NVM so that we could install Node.
Yeah.
Uh, and then I thought, oh, but and then I thought about it after the stream yesterday. Oh, we don't need to do that. We could build in a step and then test in another step, and we
Yeah,
could leverage the existing
exactly.
Docker images with the things already installed. So Go on the build part and Node on the test part.
Yep,
But it's not what you're
exactly.
doing here.
No, all the tests that I'm doing here are just manually doing it because I ran into issues with the npm test script. So these are literally just appending a file to the executable and then just verifying the contents. It's like the simplest test I could think of that
Yeah,
would
that is
work on
an
all
excellent
platforms.
test. It's based on something on the README that explains how
Mm,
to create a binary without using cache. You just use this stub and
mm,
append a tarball to it. Ideally, we would run the npm tests.
yeah,
So if we really must, we will use this, but we'll try to get the node tests to run.
yeah. I actually did a little bit of investigating with that, and currently the node tests are failing. So I didn't want to put it in right now. Like if you
Oh,
go to your actions page, uh, well, depending on the version of Node you're using, I believe it was for Node 15, it's failing. And if you go to the actions part of caxa and you just click on the main, it's got tons of failures.
whoops.
So I just didn't want to touch it.
Let's take a brief look at what is failing. I
Yeah, it
believe
has
it's
to do
everything that
with
is failing
the
is after the
examples.
release. Everything was working, something broke, and I never even looked at it.
That's how it goes.
Yeah. I bet it's something dumb about Node 14.
Yeah, it could
Oh,
be.
and I have to sign in to view the logs. Okay, that's
Oh,
unfortunate.
that's
Okay.
lame.
Yeah, hang on. We'll switch to this so you don't see my password, and
All right.
I'm logging into GitHub. And meanwhile, can you introduce me to your research very quickly?
So I'm a computational physicist. I deal with many body electron systems. And more specifically, I look at collective excitations in two-dimensional systems, which is a lot of jargon. But
Yeah,
I look at
collective excitation seems exciting, but I have never heard of
yeah.
this. What is it?
So a collective excitation is when the system you're looking at, which is like a crystal. I specifically look at graphene, but it's when all of the electrons in the material itself are doing the same thing at the same time. They're all moving or exciting in the same way, which is
Oh,
really different. Like it's normally not that. So these are very special resonances, I guess you would say, of the system.
I remember reading something to that effect. People described it with a metaphor. It's like being a soccer game, and everyone moves a, as one, as a wave.
Hmm.
I mean, when they're
Yeah,
cheering, everyone, they're still people,
yeah,
they're particles, but they behave as a collective.
yeah, exactly. That's a good metaphor. The one I always hear is imagine you have a bucket full of water and the water is sloshing back and forth, and that's the how the electrons are moving in the material. But I don't look at the electrons themselves. I actually look at the spins of the electrons. So I'm concerned with spin waves in two-dimensional materials. So the electrons aren't actually moving, they're just processing or spinning, and how they spin affects the next spin, and that can progress through the system.
So it seems like your day to day job is to probably prepare some experiments, but it's a lot of crunching data, right?
Yeah, I'm a computationalist, so I don't actually do any experiments. I calculate things and then hope they're right, basically.
Ah,
Yeah.
so it's more theoretical.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's all like my day to day is like doing functional analysis and complicating really horrible or calculating really complicated intervals, like calculus intervals.
Huh? Uh,
So,
that's interesting. I would never expect that those would be useful, but I had to learn them.
yep, they are very useful for a particular
That's
set of
weird.
people, I suppose.
I always think of theory people. I was doing a PhD in theory, in programming language theory, but it was in
Mhm.
theory, and we were very much in that stereotype of a bunch of people and some whiteboards, and we would think
Yep.
about things, and then we would sometimes implement them just to test them out. But it was a, a post thing. We would first have all the
Yeah.
ideas and prove that all the theorems, and then, oh yeah, and by the way, we implemented it just to make sure that it worked, and it does.
Yeah.
But
Of course.
you are the kind of
Here's my
theorist
theorem,
who
and it's
is
left
actually
as an
using the
exercise to
computer
the
to
reader.
do the theory research as well.
Mhm. Yeah.
Super interesting. Do you do any of these computations in? Oh, I guess you already said that you don't use JavaScript, but do you do any of these
Yeah.
computations in Go? I don't think that Go is a good language
No.
for these kinds of things, right?
No, so you're gonna laugh, but the first language that I was formally taught is Fortran.
I'm not gonna laugh because I know it is used uh, in things like stock markets and banks.
Mhm.
They still use Fortran a whole lot, and it is good for crunching numbers. It is fast.
Yes,
I
it's
think
very
it's like
fast.
faster than C, which is usually the standard that
Yep.
people go to when they're saying that
Yeah, I
something is
mean,
fast.
it still depends on who's writing it. So bad code in a fast language is still going to be way worse than good code in a slow language.
Do you
But
write good or bad code?
somewhere in between, I I write something that gives me the answer, so it's good in that sense. But all of my code is usually just for me, so I don't have to be too abstract about it. I'm more of a practical programmer. But my advisor, he only knows Fortran 1977, and I knew Fortran 1995, and I had to spend like a year teaching him just to update him up to that, and I'm still 2 decades behind. It's been crazy.
And do you usually write code that you throw away, or do you have bigger projects that keep evolving?
Um, it's a lot of one-off stuff. So I've written a lot of like low-level tools that I use in my project, but it's all basically to get one result from my project. And at this point, I've actually switched over to Python and writing C code for Python to make it faster. So I abandoned the old Fortran ways because it became a nightmare to maintain all these tools when I could just call a library and let it do it for me.
So you use the usual suspects like NumPy.
Hmm. Yes, exactly.
And what is the experience like of writing Fortran in the 21st century? What are the tools like, and the community and documentation and so forth?
So the tools are all ancient, but they all work. So everyone uses numerical recipes, which is a book that's been written in the 60s and then updated like every decade. And it's basically just numerical algorithms for solving problems like root finding or doing integrals or optimization. And they have different versions. There's one for C, one for C++, one for Fortran, and they keep updating it every year. And it's archaic code, but it works, and you can kind of plug and play with it. But there's still tons of development for scientific tools in Fortran, such as like electronic structure codes. That's actually how I got into compiling things. Was I had to spend forever compiling these scientific code bases that have terrible dependencies that you have to download yourself, compile all the dependencies yourself, and put them in specific folders. It's just a nightmare. And
I feel that
but
pain when I'm doing C and C++ compilation. I
mhm,
very rarely write C or C++. I have to be honest, I have never written a single line of C++, but I have compiled some stuff. And I feel like
yeah,
that when I'm doing C and C++ stuff and I have to deal with auto tools and whatnot, I can only imagine what
hmm
it feels like to do that in Fortran. I suppose it's a lot
yeah.
worse.
Well, it's about the same. The only problem is the code that you have is written by scientists. So their first and foremost goal is to achieve a result, and then documentation is an afterthought. So it becomes very difficult. And they like to do a lot of like hardware optimization because they're concerned about running these things on clusters and getting it to be as fast as possible. So there's a lot of like ancient tricks like using the Intel math kernel library correctly, and you have to compile to specific architectures for some of these clusters. It's a wide world of bugs everywhere.
And is it all open source?
Not all of it, but most of the stuff that I work on is. A lot of scientific software is open source, partially because it's funded by the NSF a lot, and they put in like license restrictions, or not restrictions, but license requirements for things that they fund. Um, Typically, the software you have to pay for is extremely expensive and comes with like multi-thousand bills every year just to use it, even on a desktop. So, but those are nice because they're easier to use and you don't have to compile anything, and they're actually maintained by people that are employed to do it. So there's trade-offs between compiling your own software and using something that you paid for.
And when you
And
pay for
all
things, is
these,
the documentation better?
uh, it's usually so that's the trade-off is that open source scientific tools usually have a really good forum, and there's tons of users that are willing to help you a lot. And the stuff that you pay for typically has like workshops you can go to, or better, like tutorials that teach people how to do this because they're focused on actually selling their product. But their forums and user base aren't super helpful for like solving specific problems you're having. It's just two different worlds. It's weird.
That's that's interesting. I have never talked to someone who worked in Fortran, and
Hmm.
fascinating. But meanwhile, I have logged in and now I have the error message right here, and we fixed
Hmm.
this. This error we fixed.
Okay, cool.
And I were you there yesterday for this part?
Oh yeah, when Lauren was telling you what to do.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
Lauren's
included
the
some
other developer
examples.
on Dungeon Revealer.
Oh, okay.
Hmm.
So yeah, the issue here is that I introduced some examples, and the examples include TypeScript, but I was telling TypeScript to compile the caxa code base, and I was not saying which files to use. So it was trying to compile the examples as well, and then you would complain that it's outside the root directory. So that one has
Right.
been fixed. But it seems like I have not pushed the fix, and that's why there are no builds here with a green thing. So we'll do this in parallel. And I guess you probably know about this pain, but one of the pains of working in this infrastructure part of the code base is that you have to guess what you need to do, type everything, and then to test, you have to commit, push, and wait. So we're going to make this in parallel. I'm going to commit this real quick just so we don't lose our partial work, but I'll get back to master, and I will push, and we'll see what happens. And while that is happening, we'll return to look at this branch. So git checkout.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't have autocomplete here. That's a bummer.
Yeah, iterating these workflows can be annoying. It's been nice for caxa because it only takes like a couple minutes. But for Dungeon Revealer, since we're compiling on ARM and we need SQLite 3, it actually compiles that from source every time. So it takes like 40 minutes every time you push the tag on Dungeon Revealer.
Oh,
so
that's
iterating
going to be an issue for us
awful.
as well.
Yeah,
it's going to be an issue for us as well, because we have these tests that I said, ideally we would run the actual project tests on all the different platforms, and they require the examples, one of which is a web server that has SQLite as a dependency. So I guess if we run into issues with that, we'll just disable that test on that architecture.
Yeah.
Or maybe at all.
Well, it just takes a long time. It does do it for Dungeon Revealer. It just takes like 20 minutes to compile it.
Yeah, who wants to wait 20 minutes to see a green dot appear on a screen?
That's fair.
Okay, I am interested. I am also using SQLite in actually all my projects, all my web servers. And the reason why I do it is because I want to tell people, download this binary, run it, it will work. Don't need to install any database management system and create a user and grant access to a certain database and so on and so forth. And so far, it has been smooth sailing. I really like that you can just take a file and that's your database, and I really like that you don't have to install anything extra and work with a database connection that is complicated or more complicated than just accessing a file in the file system. Right. But sometimes I have a hard time convincing other people that this makes sense. They would say, oh no, every write to the database is serialized, so it will not scale, it will not work. And it seems like your use case is more or less similar to mine. It's a small self-hosted thing, but what's the story there? Do you have any complaints about SQLite as a web server database?
No, it works fine for our app. It's just the compilation time really sucks. I believe we opened a pull request a long time ago to get them to pre-compile some of these for ARM. So what it does is it goes and tries to fetch a precompiled node or a precompiled SQLite binary. And when it sees that ARM7 isn't in the directory, it just tries to fall back to source. So if we can get the SQLite team to actually compile these, then it would just download it and it wouldn't take forever.
That reminds me of sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I believe that was a long time ago when we were talking to them, and I don't remember them ever doing anything about it.
Did you open this pull request on the SQLite 3 NPM package or on the better SQLite 3 NPM package?
That is a good question. I believe it was Lauren that actually opened it. So I'd have to get back to you on that. I have to go search through.
I mean, it shouldn't be hard to do. I can quickly look at your package JSON and I can answer that. Yeah, you're using SQLite 3 and not better SQLite 3. And usually these better something projects are like annoying. Oh, we improved this small thing that no one cares about, and that's why it's better. But in the case of better SQLite 3, it really is a better package because it is better maintained. And I'm not saying that it has precompiled binaries for ARM. I'm just saying that if you open a pull request there, it will see some activity. And also, it makes more sense from a technical perspective. It is a really weird thing, but SQLite 3 serializes all the writes to the database, and it even serializes some of the read operations as well. And that's something that you would never want to do on a server-based database system, because you would be serializing a bunch of network connections, and that's a terrible idea. But in the case of SQLite 3 that is doing everything backed by a file on the file system, it actually makes sense to serialize these things. And it makes sense in Node.js land to make these operations synchronous. You get better performance doing everything synchronously because it will be serialized by SQLite in the end of the day anyway. So if you serialize all the operations to the database by making all the operations synchronous, in Node.js there is only a single thread of execution, so effectively what you're doing is you're serializing the operations on the database at the Node.js level. That makes more sense. What the SQLite 3 package does is it provides your usual asynchronous interface to database operations, but SQLite 3 will serialize everything in the end of the day, and you're still paying the whole cost of the overhead of asynchronous code. You have to go through the loop, the event loop in Node.js, and you have to query, is there something else on the queue for me to execute? Oh yes, there is this other thing right here, but it's waiting because of the database connection. So it has that overhead. So better SQLite 3, I really recommend it. It's not just a drop-in replacement because it is synchronous, so you will have to rewrite some stuff, but I recommend it, and maybe you can get your ARM binary as well, maybe.
Right.
And
I'll push that up
if you
the
are
chain
doing
then.
that, I just want to recommend real quick, I'll plug my own stuff here, but I do have a package that makes working with better SQLite 3 even better, because in SQLite 3, one of the ways you can make it be fast to actually make the performance gains really be noticeable, and really just to the strategy for working with better SQLite 3 is that you prepare a statement and then you reuse that object, the prepared statement, every time you want to run a query. So you can imagine that when you're spinning up a server, you would prepare all the statements that the application needs, and then when a request comes in, you just run that prepared statement with new data.
Okay.
The problem with that is that you have to manage all these prepared statements yourself.
Yeah.
And you have to come up with your own strategy of how you're going to store them and make sure that they are available when they're needed and whatnot. So what my package does is it manages that for you, and it will do the optimal thing of reusing the prepared statements. And really the motivation for building this in the first place was so that you can have a SQLite tagged template literal. And I know you're not a Node.js developer, so you may not be super excited by this, but what this allows you to do is just write some query right in the JavaScript source code, including interpolation of variables. And
that's useful.
And it will use the prepared statement under the hood. It will sanitize your inputs so you don't run into any SQL injection issues. And honestly, I just believe it reads a lot better. You just have your query and you don't have to... usually the way you write this is you have a query with a bunch of question marks for the placeholders in the prepared statement, and then you have a list of arguments to pass to the prepared statement.
Oh, yeah.
And then you have to look, what is the third argument? Where is the third question mark in my query? No, none of that. It's just interpolated right there and then and there. So take a look, give it a try.
I'm very familiar with that kind of string formatting in Python. It has both ways, and the new way that you're describing is way better.
Yeah, I tend to use string interpolation in all languages that offer it. And okay, let's take a look at the GitHub Actions, and it has a green dot. See, we fixed this yesterday.
Awesome.
So now you don't have to be cautious about running the actual tests. They work. And also they ran on my machine, but I guess I closed the terminal without looking at the output. In any case, let's see what we have here. Oh, the tests may not pass. they may not pass because I am on your branch, which has not been updated with the fix that ran right here.
I could update that real quick if you want.
It doesn't matter.
Okay.
We already proved that it worked everywhere.
Sure.
But there is something. Oh, so there is a precedent. I didn't even remember about this, but there is a feature in Caxa that allows you to produce a .app thing. So it's not a command line executable. It's a .app that you can have on your Finder menu, and then you can double click on it, and it will work. And I cannot test this on GitHub because I don't have a graphical user interface to click around.
Oh, no.
When you run a test on macOS, it tells you, oh, this is what you need to do to test the rest of the test suite.
Oh.
So everything passed, and I can run this, and it will open a terminal, and it will run, and it will show some things. So the test passed. But all this means that there is already a precedent of something we cannot test in GitHub Actions, the same way we will not be able to test on the M1 architecture. All right. So now let's look at this build, and we will modify this along the way so that it only builds and uploads the assets, but it doesn't run the tests because we will have another task, another job to do that. So I don't usually name my... If you don't put a name here, it will just use this name, I suppose, on the interface.
Yeah, so that will actually give you... that's a matrix, and it will actually give you building Linux binaries, building Ubuntu, or building Windows binaries, so you can actually... It's for easier navigation of the build log.
Something like this, you mean?
Yes. Oh, is it just picking out what's in the matrix and just putting it there?
Yep.
Oh, well.
We could have this. It doesn't really matter, but for consistency with everything else, I'm going to remove this, and I guess it will be fine. If it's not fine, then we can bring it back. So this is going to run on the runner, which is... Oh, these are the 64 native binaries, so that's easy. It will just run on the default GitHub Actions environments. So what we have right here is very similar to what we do. Oh, we're not building anything. So it's similar to this only in the sense that it is running in all these different operating systems. So I see that you're not saying Ubuntu latest. You're saying a specific version.
That's because it was, I think it was a couple months ago, Ubuntu latest wasn't 20.04 for a while, and it kept throwing errors, so I just hard-coded in 20.04 when it was complaining. That was a few months ago on Dungeon Reviewer, though.
Yeah, it seems like it complains sometimes when it's about to update the platform, but I think that...
Exactly.
So we don't have to come back to this when, like, in 3 years, Ubuntu 20 will be out of the LTS, so we'll just say latest, and this will work forever.
For sure.
And the output needs to change, I suppose. It will now say, like, I don't know exactly what to say. I don't know if I say something like this or...
Yeah. Typically, people use AMD 64 for that, rather than x64. I don't know. It's used interchangeably, I've seen.
Yeah, computer architecture names are a mess.
Yeah.
And then the test binary, we don't need this. We will not test this action.
Yeah, it's actually testing in that action. And I was using that to make sure it didn't overwrite the binary that we want to release. So I was just using another name for it. And the reason why I'm doing these extra parameters is because you need the .exe on the Windows one. So I couldn't just append something to the end of the string. So I figured it was easiest just to give it another parameter.
Yes, that's exactly what I do, for instance, in Kill the Newsletter, one of the projects using Caxa. So let's go to the source and look at this workflow real quick. So yeah, we have a matrix here, and we have the operating system, and then we have an artifact name because of the .exe. So yeah, I'm familiar with that. So macOS runner macOS latest, and we don't need a test bin. And look at that, I see a parallel. The OS and the runner share a name, so we can say something like this. And when it says runs on, we'll say runner latest.
For sure, yeah. I had it separate because I had the 2004, but that works as well.
Yeah. And the code that you have here under the steps for building on, I guess we are calling it AMD 64 now.
Sure.
So the code that we have here is very different from the code that we will have when building for ARM, which is why we have separate jobs, right?
Yeah, it's for ARM you have to spin up emulation and Docker, but the compilation code or the command to compile the binary is the same. You could make an environment variable for the entire job that holds that command, but it seemed like unnecessary to do that when I can just have it in two places.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of Control-C, Control-V. I think it's underestimated as a reuse tool. So the binaries will, the stubs will be Linux AMD 64, macOS AMD 64, and Windows AMD 64. I don't know. We may just call it Windows because there are only one.
Yeah.
But you know what? If we are consistent with this, we can also get rid of it. Oh no, because of the .exe.
Mm-hmm.
So it runs on the latest, and then the steps are checkout code. You can see that I don't have a name for this. I mean, it is pretty clear when you're looking at the log. It looks like this. It's not bad.
Yeah. I've just defaulted to having names to make it easier for people to read. That's all. But it's your repository. It's your style.
Yeah, I find myself copying and pasting stuff and then having to delete a bunch to get into this. But then when reading here, it all makes sense to me. And when reading it here, it all makes sense. So I'm comfortable doing that. And then we will set up Go with a particular Go version.
Yeah.
Was it you who mentioned that you need 16 for this work?
Yeah, if you try it on 15, I believe it's the os.require it complains about. It's something about the OS package that you need 16 for.
You know what's interesting? Golang release history. When did 16 come out?
Very recent.
Very recently, but not as recent as I was thinking. Because I was thinking that when I initially developed this, it was still 15 that was out. I don't know if you can check for this. I don't know how to check which version of Go that compiled a certain stub. But we can look at the date when these things were compiled. So it was 3 months ago. I suppose it was compiled with 15. I don't remember updating Go, but I may be wrong. I don't know. That installation of macOS has already been formatted, so we'll never know. Okay, so the default is not 16, and that's why we need it. And this means probably 16 or newer.
Yes.
Awesome. Now, to build the binary... Oh, this command I remember. You lifted this from someone else's comment, right?
PD Castro, I think is his name, or Castaro. The guy that works for Balena Lab.
Yes.
I really liked it. It's very simple.
Yeah. And then you need this bin because it will be reused here, there, and there, and you didn't want to copy and paste this part. And this is a reason why you need bash on Windows as well, because
Yeah,
that's not how
exactly.
you set up an environment variable in Windows.
Mhm.
But we already established that using bash was a good idea, so I'm comfortable doing that. And then cgo enabled, and you have to be very specific. Usually when I am setting up environment variables, I say it like this, but because of the Windows
Okay.
compatibility layer, it may not work. So we'll leave this, and then bash picks this up. And then go build this binary, the stub. Oh, we changed, we'll change. I did not copy this part yet, but can we set a working directory for a job?
Yeah, so let me double check that. I think you can, or you could just put cd stubs at the top of
Yeah.
that run command.
You know what? That makes sense, because even in CMD, the oldest Windows thing, it will CD will work. We'll just CD.
Yes.
And you know what oh yeah, I forgot to mention this. I had two ideas when you said something. I forget what, but I had two ideas. Oh, when you were talking about how Dungeon Revealer needs to compile SQLite from source on ARM. I had this crazy
Mhm.
idea and I want to run it by you.
Okay.
There's a different strategy to do this whole building thing. What if, instead of shipping the stub, we ship Go, the compiler? When you install the caxa npm package, it doesn't
Mhm.
download the stub from GitHub Actions or GitHub releases. It downloads Go from here, let's say. And it's a big
Uh,
download, but whatever.
yeah,
It's only used for development anyway. And then you compile the stub on the user's machine.
you could definitely do that. Maybe that could be a fallback, like if someone tries to do it on like that S390X whatever thing, whatever those silly architectures are that no one knows.
Yeah. And it probably isn't supported by Node.js anyway.
Yeah, exactly. So I kind of view Kasha and the stubs as separate projects. Like I could see the stubs being their own GitHub project, and people can just use them to make self-extracting binaries. And then
Yes.
Kasha is just a convenient way to put your node project in it.
Yeah. There is another project on which Caxa is inspired that does exactly that, but it seems to have been abandoned. But they had a project that is, here are some ways to build self-extracting executables. Here is a way to use that. I think it was in Python. I don't even remember. But it wasn't well maintained, and it was written in a weird language, and it didn't do all the things we needed it to do. So that's why I didn't just use that. But I can see Caxa being used, or the stubs being used separately. I mean,
Hmm.
it is just a weird trick you can play, and it isn't related to Node at all. Maybe someday we will extract that. So yeah, I was thinking about just downloading Go, and then we would have, first of all, a bigger download, which is annoying.
Hmm.
But the whole issue of trust goes out the window. You're compiling the stubs, and
That's
compiling
true.
the stub is super fast anyway. Probably the longest part of the process is downloading this 100 megabytes
Hmm.
of a tarball here. Do you think that that strategy would be advantageous as a
I
default strategy?
Yeah, I could see it being useful as a fallback necessarily. Some people might not like that you're downloading the entire Go language, but I definitely think that could be usable. And if you didn't want to maintain all these stubs, that's definitely a way to do it for sure. And I think you could convince people that's the right way to do it in by saying you don't want to maintain the stubs.
It's not only that, it's also the issue of trust that you and some other people
True.
have brought up. And ultimately, you will have to trust me because I have access to the repository. I can change the binary on the GitHub
Right.
release. But if you're compiling it
Yeah,
yourself, then you are now putting your trust on the Go compiler people that you already were anyway.
yeah, that is true. So the whole point of trust that I was bringing up is that we can take steps to mitigate the risk, not completely trust the process, but you can at least make it more difficult for a bad faith actor to do something. Because right
Yeah.
now, someone could just put in a binary, open a pull request, and then you accidentally merge it, and now there's a problem. But if we put in all these actions workflows, then it's at least they have to fake the entire actions infrastructure to get that to happen.
Yeah, and now the trust is on the fact that GitHub Actions logs cannot be faked.
Mhm.
And that's how we are connecting all the dots. Well, is there any way? I am interested in this as a curiosity. I don't really care that much if we have to say to people, yeah, either you trust the stub or you compile it yourself. But is there any way for us to see where this ran? Because I can self-host GitHub Actions runner, and
You
then
can,
in my
yeah,
machine, I could fake the logs. Is there
that
any
is
way for
true.
me to prove that this has run on someone else's infrastructure, and if they trust Microsoft, they trust the stub?
That is a good question. I haven't looked into to self-hosting runners much. Um, but then again, that's so you're not getting rid of the problem necessarily. You're just making it more difficult for people to create the problem. And I
Yeah,
think that at least helps people to trust you a bit more.
yeah,
So people can choose their level of trust in you, is what I'm trying to say.
fair. I don't really care if people don't trust me. I'm giving them the source. If they don't trust me, look at the code that you're
Yeah,
going to compile and compile it yourself. Don't really care
yeah.
that much.
The only reason why I'm concerned about it is because it is a self-extracting binary, and especially on Windows, antivirus stuff complains. And right now, the stance is just trust us. So I could see that being abused very quickly. And if our stance is just trust us and look at the source code, then but you don't have a clear chain of custody, that could be a problem.
Yeah, we have to rethink the way that we are putting the tarball in the stub. Instead of just appending it to the executable, we
Yeah.
should look at the data structure and do the more proper thing. We'll get there at some point. But
Oh
I
yeah.
don't think it's only in Windows. It also happens in macOS sometimes. If you compiled it yourself, that's kind of interesting really. If you compiled it yourself, if you build the stub on your machine and you run it, it's okay. If you
Mhm.
upload that file and download it again, then you have to run through a whole series of hoops to be able to run that executable. So internally, macOS is tracking where files are coming from,
Right.
and then you have to go to system preferences and security and privacy, and then you have to explicitly allow a button shows up
Right.
here, and you have to explicitly allow execution. And I don't care too much about this because my use cases are like self-hosted stuff, and
Mhm.
in that scenario, people are kind of tech savvy, so they would know about this. But some people, I think, will be interested in trying to sign and notarize these executables.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. So test the binary. We can get rid of these for now and test
Yeah.
results.
You can get
If
rid of that too. That
failure,
was just reporting.
and then upload the artifact with the name stubs.
That's the name of the zip file essentially. That's the name of the artifact that collects all of the files.
Isn't it annoying that if you try to, I don't know if you ran into this issue, but if you try to upload a zip as a artifact on a build, it will produce, when you download it back, it's a zip of a
Hmm.
zip.
That's very annoying. I've never tried that. I've never manually uploaded release assets.
I don't think you can. You have to use this action to upload stuff. Or at least you have to be from within a build to upload stuff. But if your upload is not an executable like this, but a .zip, then it will zip your zip. And I understand that if you upload multiple files, which is something
I
you can
understand what
do,
you're saying. Yeah,
but I mean,
yeah.
I understand it makes sense that it would zip all the files you upload, but the issue is, couldn't they detect that I uploaded a zip and not zip it again?
That's fair. Yeah, I think that issue is because the stubs name is that it's saying this is the archive that's collecting all the different things you could possibly upload to that archive.
Yeah, but if I'm
So on
only uploading
subsequent
one
steps,
thing
it's
and it's a zip, it could have a special case. If you're only uploading one thing and it's
yeah,
a zip, don't zip it again. Okay,
that's
I
fair.
have an issue with this, and that is all the 3 platforms will upload this an asset with the same name, right?
No, so it will be one single build artifact zip, and the path is actually selecting the file that you upload to the zip.
Ah.
Mhm.
So later when you download this, do you download this in any of the other parts of the script here? Yes,
Yes,
you
in
download
job
this.
upload, yeah. So by default, it catches all of the artifacts and then it just uh, extracts the zip in that folder.
Oh, that's interesting. The
Mhm.
way I'm doing it in Q the newsletter and my day job course lore, not my website, source. I'm doing this differently, and I think your way is a lot smarter.
Mhm.
The way I'm
You don't
doing
have to
this
manage all the
is,
names.
yeah, so the way I'm doing this is I am producing 3 different artifacts with 3
Mhm.
different names, and then when I
Mhm.
download, I give it the correct name.
Yeah, but you have to do that for all of them,
Yeah, there is
right?
one advantage of doing things my way though, and that is if you want to do this, and I did it several times, when you have a build artifact and you want to test it on your Raspberry Pi or on my machine or whatever, then you can download
Mhm.
for your specific platform. You don't have to download everything.
Yeah, that is true.
Hmm. And this is specifically important in my case because I am telling people who are testing nightly builds. So if I
Mhm.
am fixing a bug for them or whatever, I can tell them go to this GitHub action run and download the artifact for your machine and then run it. So they would have to download the whole thing.
Yeah, I think Kasha's use case is so simple that it's just you download the thing and then just pick the one you want. It's not like a whole directory you need to pick. It's just pick the file you want. That this way is easier.
And it's even with all the, I guess, 7 architectures we are going to support, each
Hmm.
stub is like 3 megabytes. So it will be 20
Yeah,
megabytes. So even all the stubs is smaller than just this one
yeah,
build of Kill the Newsletter. So I'm comfortable doing your way. I think it's a lot smarter, but I am also comfortable keeping Kill the Newsletter this way. And I think you would
yeah.
probably do something similar to Dungeon Revealer. So yeah, this is smart. Stubs, and you don't even give it an extension. Oh, so that's an example right here. When you download this, it's a zip containing a tarball.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. So in this case, we will only have a single stubs artifact. I suppose I can
Hmm.
go to your fork and I will be able to see
Yes.
one run.
Oh, don't look at that branch. That I was testing weird things on that. But yeah.
I don't see any artifacts because the
No,
build failed,
that's
but
the
let's go to one in
main.
which the build succeeds.
Yeah. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
that's...
I could call it stubs.zip, I suppose.
Oh, but you shouldn't. Or should you? I don't know. Let's see what happens when I just click this.
Yeah.
It
It will
downloads as
just download.
stubs.zip.
Never mind.
Yeah. Is not commonly downloaded and may be dangerous. Oh, that's interesting. So it seems like Chrome has a record of file downloads, and it
Hmm,
checks downloads against that record. Okay, fun stuff.
that's interesting. Yeah,
Uh,
so the build artifacts that I'm using are all internal. Like I wouldn't expect a user to come download them anyway. That's why I kept it very simple. So
ah,
it's mainly the uploading the artifacts is a way to move the the binaries from the build stages down to the upload stage. That's the only
and
way you can move
you
files.
don't care about nightly builds and telling people go try
No.
this out. Fair.
Well, you could tell them to go to the page and just go download it. We do that with Dungeon Revealer sometimes, but for our use cases, we usually don't ask people to go check on nightly builds like that.
Yeah. To be honest, I have all that infrastructure set up and I have not used it once. I'm curious to know what is the size of your app. I assume it's bigger.
Big. It's quite big. I think it's either in the 30s or 60s of megs.
No artifacts on these builds.
Yeah, yeah, we have multiple workflows, so you'll have to find one that's build binary. Yeah, at the top.
You do have
Or hundreds
separate.
now.
Yeah, it is
uh,
similar in size, but you do have different artifacts for the different architectures.
yeah, it's actually the top row is a zip of all of them, and I guess we are yeah, since we did want the ability for people to try things out occasionally on master, I we separated it out into a separate build artifact. It's been a while since I worked on that, so I don't remember all the details.
How are you hacking together this version? Because it's not using caxa
We're
as.
using package PKG.
Ah, so you're still using
Yeah.
PKG for this.
Yeah. As soon as Kasha supports ARM, we're going to switch over though. There's even a waiting pull request.
It's coming out.
Yes. That's why I'm trying to help because we really want that.
That's so nice of you. And I really appreciate you joining me for this session. I'm having a lot of fun doing this.
Yeah, so much.
So let's see. Build ARM. Oh, there is a wrinkle here. We need to
Hmm.
cross compile for macOS ARM. And
Right.
it's not a huge. Having this is not a huge priority because of Rosetta 2. It's a very different situation on the Raspberry Pi where
Hmm.
you cannot run an
Right.
Intel executable. But it would be nice, wouldn't it?
It would be nice. That might be a future thing if we think more about how to do it. I
Oh,
mean,
it's
we
not
could
that
always just
hard.
separate the Mac. Yeah, we could separate the Mac out of the matrix and then just make it or put it in there. Or you could check to see what runner you're on and then execute a command.
Oh, that's smart. I wasn't thinking about that. I was going to put one extra argument here that would be the command to run. So it would have something like extra argument or extra
Oh, yeah, that would
commands.
work too.
Yeah, but your idea, I like it. So I will run some commands, but I will only run it if the matrix output, no, the matrix
Uh,
OS.
yeah, Matrix OS.
Oh, it's not matrix runner anymore. It's matrix OS here. So if the matrix OS is equal to Mac OS, then I'm going to run something that goes to the stubs directory. And in this case, I don't need all the variables and everything. I can just hard code stuff, but.
You could.
And
Yeah, because you're gonna hard code the cross compilation stuff anyway. So
yes, I'm thinking about this command right here. It may be nice to have this as part of our npm scripts because
yeah,
you could compile on your own machine. And I'm not saying that we want to run the npm command here because I am not sure that this image will have npm. I think it will though.
it doesn't. No, it doesn't yet. But you could just put in the uses
Setup node.
setup. Yeah, And then you could, after you build these, you could run the npm test script in just another run command after it compiles.
Fair.
Yeah, I was actually playing around with that earlier today.
I tend to like the idea of building in one job and testing in another, because then
That's
there
fair.
will be no Go available on the test environment, and that is more realistic. Though we all know that it doesn't matter if Go is installed or not, the
Yeah.
test will either pass or fail. But I tend to like the separation. What's your feeling?
Um, I think the separation would be uh, it would help say this is a new machine and it's proving that it's working on a new machine.
Oh, and there's
So I
another
think the
thing that is
separation would
important.
work.
The installation of the stub, right?
Right.
Because now when installing, we need to pick the right stub, and we would be exercising that part as well. The stub would not be coming from your regular source. It would be coming from a GitHub
Right.
asset.
So if you're downloading at install time, then oh yeah. So you got to find a way, if you want to keep it all in the same setup, you got to make sure that it can just use the stub that's in the actions rather than downloading the one that's previously compiled on the releases when you're
Yeah,
doing the test.
and I think that's easy to do. There are different ways of doing this. You can pass some command line arguments to the installation process. We could just check a certain path, and if there is already a stub there, then we don't bother downloading another one.
Sure.
There are many strategies to doing this. That's completely acceptable. On the test job here on GitHub Actions, what we'll do is just download the asset first, and then try to install the package. And then we will either pass a command line flag to tell it use the stub over here, or we will put it in a certain path.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable.
And in fact, I think that this setup node thing, I remember reading this somewhere. The setup node is when you want to either publish to npm, you want to publish a package to npm, or you want to use a specific version of node. In my case, I don't want to do either of these. I just want to run a script. So I believe I don't need this line because the default environments will already have node in whatever version they want, but it will already have it. So we'll leave this commented out and we'll see if I'm right. So yeah, with that, I can come here to the package JSON file, and we are no longer cross-compiling, so I'll have a build stub here, and oh, we need to know in which operating system we are.
Right.
And I cannot think of a way to do that. But I think there is a weird coincidence that... Oh, no. I was going to say that there is a weird coincidence that the name only goes last, so I could accept a command line argument to the call of the command itself, but that's not the case. So... Here's an idea. The problem here is the .exe at the end, right?
Right.
But we don't need that. When building the stub, we will copy this. When building with caxa, when building a binary with caxa, we will copy the stub somewhere, and then we will attach the tarball to it.
It's true.
I'm not a
And
Windows
just
expert
append
here. I'm
Neither
no
am
Windows
I.
expert here, but I suppose, what is your main platform for development?
Linux. I've been
Fair.
using Linux for over a decade now, and I haven't looked back.
Fair. These days, my answer to this question is yes. Which platform do you use? Yes, I use all of them.
That's fair.
Because of caxa and because of some Reaper stuff that I also do for video editing. I had so many people ask me for a Windows support that I bought a Windows machine, and I also installed Linux there. So these days I use all 3 operating systems from time to time, and
That's good. That's useful.
it is super nice to do it. I learned a lot because I was not running Linux on the desktop for a while, and I was not running Windows for 10 plus years. But there are some things that Windows is doing that is better than what macOS does. And there are some things that Linux is doing that is better than what Windows is doing. So now I learned that there is no perfect operating systems. All 3
Yeah,
of
that
them
is
are
definitely
good
true.
in different ways. So, yeah. What if we hard code the name of the stub? We can hard code the name of the stub here, or the path to the stub. It will not have a .exe at the end, and everything will be easier. The only place where we have to care about the extension is when we are... So for instance here, where is it? Here. Yeah, so when we are actually building the thing in JavaScript, we have to check, are we on Windows and do we have a .exe at the end? And we may even change that, because I am planning to introduce some breaking changes to caxa, and they are ridiculous, but they are necessary. So, and I talked about them 2 days ago, but we are introducing breaking changes. So this will be caxa 2.0. So in caxa 2.0, we may append the .exe for the Windows version. And yeah, since we are going to break things. In case you are curious, or someone else who is watching is curious, what we are doing that is going to break is... can I find an example of an invocation? Yeah, when calling caxa to build a binary, you have to pass each part of the command separately. You don't pass the whole command you want to run. You pass it separately. And that's because, as I said, when the stub is calling the command, it's written in Go, and in Go I don't think there is no easy way for you to just pass a command to Go and have it run the command, because there is no built-in facility for parsing the command line arguments and whatnot. So instead you have to pass an array of your program and then the arguments to it. So I just forwarded instead of trying to parse the command line arguments myself, just forwarded this problem to the user, which means that you have to call this with command and then all the parts of your command separately. The problem is, what if you want to pass, like you call node with your index.js, and then one of the arguments is hello, or I said hello and I wrote help. So what if it's help? Now this help will be interpreted as attaching to caxa, not as attaching. It will be another one of these, for instance. It will not be a part of these, which is correct. That is the behavior I would expect. The problem is, it doesn't work. So the way we are going to fix this, I think, is we will have something like this instead. And that's how we are going to call this. So if you put the dash dash in the end, then it means whatever is left is the command that you want to run. And that is a breaking change. So we are looking at 2.0 just for this stupid reason, but we are looking at 2.0. Since we are breaking stuff, I am more than happy to break other things like the .exe at the end and simplify a lot of the code base.
Okay.
Are you on board?
Yeah, that's totally fine.
Okay.
As long as it works in the end, I'm cool with that.
So with that, we can take the command from here, put it in package.json. And the reason why I care about this is that you can easily just say npm run stub, and it will compile the stub on your machine. So I have a very simple story on how to compile, which is how it was before. I had a very simple story for it to compile the stubs.
Yeah, but it needs to know what the binary name is going to be.
The binary name is going to be stub.
Oh, okay. You're just going to call it stub.
Yeah, we are going to hard code this name. And then when installing the package, we will download from different sources, but we will produce the same file name.
Okay, I understand now.
So cgo enabled 0, that is...
So that's specifically so that the binary is statically linked. Because on Linux, if you don't have that, it'll dynamically link with libc, and that can cause problems with Raspberry Pis and the Internet of Things. Because not everyone uses libc. Some people use Muscle, I believe it's called, like Alpine.
Do you run Alpine on a Raspberry Pi?
I don't, but actually one of the Docker images, specifically the ARM v6 image, is only Alpine. So I'm compiling with Alpine for ARM v6 on this.
Awesome. And
but it shouldn't be a problem if it's statically linked.
Yeah, sure. I have no idea how Go works, how it statically links using a different libc. I guess it probably the Go developers have re-implemented everything, right?
Well, what I mean by statically linked is they pull all the functions from the C library that you wanted to pull and put it in the binary, rather than relying on the external library at runtime. So it makes a self-contained binary.
No, I understand that it is a self-contained binary, but are you sure that it's copying the stuff from Muzzle, for instance? I don't think it is. I think they have re-implemented all that stuff.
If you look at if you do file on these, I believe if you go to the top of my pull request, I gave an example of the file output, and it tells you exactly what they're linked against.
Oh, so they have not re-implemented that stuff.
Yeah, some of them were linked against some of the emulated libraries as well, which can be problematic. Yeah, okay. There you go.
So it includes all the parts of libc that it needs in the binary. And that's my way of doing things. I love static builds.
Yes, agreed.
So we need to know what the output name will be, and this is the time when we make this decision. I have an opinion on this. I think it should be node modules .bin caxa. Yeah, there you go. I think that's what it should be. It will go into your node modules under bin and... Oh, but hang on. That will conflict with the caxa executable itself. That's dumb.
Yeah, exactly.
Caxa stub. Like this, or like that. Like that.
Yeah, single dash.
Yeah. And then that's the place where you will have to download the stub when installing, and that's the place where you have to compile it yourself. That's where you have to put it. Single place, single source of truth. And you know what's interesting about this? When you install... There is a sliver of sun in my face. I'll be back. Entertain our viewers, please.
I'm not sure how to do that. Do we have viewers? If the viewers want to ask me a question about anything, that would be great.
Okay, I did not hear anything you said.
That's fine. There was nothing of consequence.
Okay, so where was I? Right here. This is where you put the binary, and where do you find the source? You have to be in the right directory. So what if we just put this in the source directory?
Yeah, I mean, that sounds reasonable.
Because we no longer have all these stubs sitting around here, so we'll just do that. And then we... Oh, I was going to say something when I noticed the sun. What's interesting is you install caxa in your application, like Dungeon Revealer, which will put this stub there, because it needs the stub to produce the binary. And then if you're not careful about the way you prepare the application for packaging, the stub will be in there. And I guess that's already the case, really. If you don't prune caxa from the build, you end up with all the three stubs, the three existing stubs will end up in there.
Yeah. A self-extracting installer.
Yeah. I'm happy with that. So, okay, that's where we are putting the stub, and this path needs to be repeated over here and there. And of course, this needs to be skipped because of quotes within quotes. You want to hear something interesting about these quotes? In Linux, you can do single quotes. I'm sure you know that because you're a Linux user. On Windows, it may not work that way. So the
that was actually the problem with the table that I made was single quotes. It was dumb.
It took me a freaking week to figure out one of these quoting situations in one of my Reaper scripts. Because Reaper runs commands on the command line, but the quoting rules are different in Reaper than they are in CMD, and they are different in PowerShell, and they are different in Bash. So,
it's a nightmare.
Yeah, so this should work in most situations. Now, there is a trade-off here. The trade-off is, if we try to run this on Windows without Bash, in our action we are running this in Bash, so we are fine.
Yeah.
But suppose that someone has a Windows development machine, they don't have the Windows subsystem for Linux installed, and they're just in PowerShell, or better yet, they are in CMD, and they try to run this, it will fail because echo is not a thing.
Really? Echo, so whenever I use Echo in GitHub Actions on Windows, it works. I don't know if they've just made a link.
I think it works in PowerShell and it doesn't work in CMD. And here is something we can do. By the way, I think we will not finish today. Are you up to doing this again tomorrow? I'm having a lot of fun. I would do this the whole week if you wanted.
I'm cool with it.
Okay. So I now am spinning up my Windows development machine, and we can try this out real quick. I'm not going to bother putting this on the stream. I would have to set up the whole streaming situation here, but I can test like echo hello. Oh, it works in a weird way. If you echo and then quotes hello, it echoes quotes hello. It isn't aware of the quoting. And of course, if you just echo hello, it works.
Yeah. So I know on GitHub Actions, if you want to use echo in Windows, you need to quote what you're doing. So echo with nothing won't, it will error out on Actions. But if you do echo quote quote, it'll do the new line that you expect. So I don't know if that's still a thing in an actual Windows machine, but I know on Actions you have to do that.
Okay, so what I did right now is I echoed with quotes, but I redirected the output to somewhere, to a file.
Right.
And I wonder what that file will look like. Hello, txt. Quotes. So the quotes are there. So this will not work because the quotes will be there. And I suppose that the hashes have special meaning. So the hash sign that I'm using as a separator has a special meaning. But in Windows, it works. I can echo without the double quotes, just pound, 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 caxa, pound, pound, pound. And it works. It puts the thing in there.
Can you do echo and then redirect to a thing with no quotes?
You can. I just did it.
Okay, then Actions must be weird. Because you can't do that in Actions, but if you can do that on normal Windows.
Yeah, that is in fact weird. So there are different ways of dealing with this. One way I can think of is we can use something like, I have to return to my other computer that is attached to the streaming computer so you can see this. But we can use something like this package. Oh, no internet? That is bad. Some cable must have been disconnected. Now I bumped into the microphone. Nightmare situation. So it seems like the stream is not picking this up. I will try to refresh some things here. There you go. So we can install a node package that is a compatibility layer, and now you're running all your commands in JavaScript. So when you say echo, you really are calling a JavaScript program, and then your quotes will work, probably. And that's the strategy we used, by the way, in the previous command. You may have seen this.
Yeah, I remember seeing SHX, but I didn't know what it was.
So we could put that here, but the problem is in our GitHub action, we would need to install this.
Yeah.
And if we do that, we could use cross-env for this part as well. And then we will be sure that it's completely cross-platform. I can go one way or another. I'm leaning towards this because I am more confident that this, and of course that, I'm confident that this will work in more places.
Okay.
So let's read over this again. Cross-env, is cross-env already in the dependencies? Yes. And SHX, I assume it is because it was used before. So cross-env, this, and then SHX echo. Oh, this is just for the new line.
Yeah.
What if we changed the separator? We are going to break things anyway, so it doesn't really matter. What if we change the separator so it's less awkward?
Yeah, so just take out the new line and use just the separator.
Yeah, and what if we don't even have the hashes anymore? The reason why I had this is because I wanted people to be able to open the binary on like a hex editor or really on Visual Studio Code. That's usually how I do it. I just say to Visual Studio Code, whatever, this is a text file, show me. And then it will show a bunch of crap, but at the end, it will show the separator. And I wanted people to be able to look at the binary that way to understand how it works. But it makes things more awkward when building the stub and when looking at the separator in the Go code. I also think that it makes things more awkward there. So what if we change the separator? The separator just becomes caxa.
Yeah, that sounds like it works.
Oh. There is something interesting. If you look at the binary as a text file, the binary includes some code that will look for the separator, right? Because the binary will look at itself during runtime. So if I put the string caxa in there, the caxa string may appear or it may not. I don't know how Go compiles their stuff, but the caxa word may appear in the source, in the binary itself. So here's a trick, and it's a trick we already play. We're going to play this trick again. In the stub, we have a repeat here. So yeah, I have a comment explaining this here. I have a repeat here of the pound three times, and this is here so that the binary will not have the separator in it because I am computing this at runtime. And we'll have to play the same trick again. So the separator will be caxa, caxa, caxa. And on the source code, we will have something that will be like repeat 3 times the word caxa. So that the separator doesn't appear in the source, in the produced binary. Okay, caxa. Output this to the stub, and I don't need this part. So on my development machine, I have everything set up. I have installed all the packages yesterday. So I have crossenv, I have shx, I have go. So I should be able to run build stub.
Moment of truth.
And it ran. And now I will do the thing I said that I did before when looking at this stuff. So let's find, I guess I have to refresh and find caxa stub. And we will open this as a text file. And at the end, caxa,
Right.
new line. Caxa, new line. Do we want the new line? I guess. Could I say print? Is that supported?
I believe printf is on Windows as well.
So we don't even need shx?
Maybe if you just use printf, yeah.
I'm thinking about how much do I care about the new line. No, I prefer to have shx because I trust it more that it will work on every operating system. So let's check this again. Crossenv to set the environment variable, go build output. This is the hard-coded path for the stub binary. This is the source for the stub. Oh, I wonder if the TypeScript compiler will complain about having a file it doesn't understand. So let's TSC real quick, and we'll see if TypeScript complains. If it complains, then we'll have to put this Go file somewhere else. Oh, this branch doesn't have that fix. I will reapply the fix here because it's so quick to do. So I guess it is include source ****. Okay, so TypeScript. What does TypeScript do? Does it copy the file over because it doesn't recognize it? Does it ignore it?
I have no idea.
Yeah, so there's a bunch of junk from the failed run before. We'll have to do this again. Not that it matters, I'm just curious. It ignores the file that it doesn't recognize, which is exactly what I wanted it to do.
Good.
Though I wouldn't really care if it put the Go file in there, but in any case. So, yeah, this is good. But you know what? It has been almost 2 hours. So how about we wrap this up for now? And do I have the pleasure of meeting you again tomorrow, same time?
Sure. Yeah, I can do that.
So thank you very much for the pull request, for all the work you put into Dungeon Revealer, and for using my project or considering using it when we are finished with this.
Soon.
And for showing up for the stream. This channel is somewhat new, so not many people watch while we are streaming, but some people watch the video later, and I'm sure they will be delighted to have you here as a guest. I see you again tomorrow. Just want to say this again. You are awesome. Good luck with the PhD. Are you at the writing stage at this point?
Yes, I'm using this to procrastinate from writing.
Yeah, you know what I did when I was procrastinating? I was using LaTeX to write. And instead of using LaTeX, I thought, why don't I use JavaScript? Because I was writing my dissertation.
Why?
I was writing my dissertation, the code that backed my dissertation work was in JavaScript. So I thought, why don't I typeset my dissertation in JavaScript as well? Because a browser is capable of producing a PDF that is very nicely formatted. There is a browser engine just for this. It's called Prince. It is this guy right here. So it's like a browser. No, it's not that guy. Where is it? Guess I'll have to go. Oh, Prince XML is the old name, but it's still the website URL. In any case, it's like a browser, but it's meant to produce PDFs. So it has all these nice features that allow you to put the page numbers on the margins and put page breaks where you need them, and producing a PDF-A, which is a special kind of PDF meant for archival, and that's what my university required. And yeah, it is capable of lots of things. So I would produce an HTML file that I would then convert into a PDF using this. So you can think of this as like a browser engine, except that instead of showing you stuff on the browser, it produces a PDF.
Right.
And I got that to work. I spent a lot of time doing it, but I got that to work, which was super nice because then I had JavaScript as the language that my work was on. And then I could use the JavaScript syntax highlighters and whatnot for syntax highlighting JavaScript, which is the best you can do. You can use the engine that runs in Visual Studio Code. So I would produce a PDF that would have the same syntax highlighter, the same colors, the same fonts, the same theme that I would see on my text editor. And for some reason, I found that super appealing to me. So yeah, that's how I procrastinated. I procrastinated so much that my dissertation died and I never graduated.
Well, it happens. Academia is a weird place.
Yeah. All right. I hope that your dissertation will be finished someday. Is there something that you want to plug before we leave? Do you have, like, besides Dungeon Revealer, do you have other side projects, or do you have a Patreon page for Dungeon Revealer or something else you are working on?
No, Dungeon Revealer is like the biggest project that I work on. I have a personal coffee set up if anyone wanted to contribute to that. But we don't have anything set up for Dungeon Revealer at the moment. But if you like playing games,
okay, so here's what we can do. Send me an email. I guess that's the most stable way of communicating with me right now. Send me an email with whatever you want to plug, the URL for Dungeon Revealer and whatever else, and I'll put it in this video's description for anyone who is watching on demand. And I'll also, of course, add this to the README for caxa, because I want to have some use cases of caxa on the README, and I want to put your name there since you are now a big contributor of caxa. All right. Thank you very much. I see you again tomorrow. It has been awesome. And that's it for today. You all who are watching this can follow me on, you can subscribe to the channel. That's the language used on YouTube. You can support me on Patreon and PayPal. And I see you all tomorrow, same time. Bye.